Hi Pigeons! Welcome to my first ever set building video, where we'll be crafting a desert canyon diorama, complete with real sand and ninjas! Tying back to my previous video, I did a really fun art trade with LPS Cobalt, and he made this amazing LPS custom of a Yiga Clan ninja from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild video games. The Yiga Clan is one of my favorite parts of the whole Zelda franchise, and in the games they have a hideout in the desert region called Kurusa Valley, which blends Japanese elements with the canyon environment, which I think is so cool. I've been wanting to take proper photos of this custom ever since I received him, and so I thought it would be extra special to craft a set inspired by this. I've noticed that many LPS sets tend to take place in forests, which is something I also want to do someday, but I thought this would be something new to offer, especially since canyons are my favorite landform. With that being said, I invite you to join me in the making of this set. Let's go! To start out, I created the canyon structure with a sheet of paperboard as my base, and used hot glue to attach two separate paperboard panels as the walls. Then to make the rock formations, I cut up even more paperboard panels into random shapes, which I crushed and reshaped to create form and texture. The finished result is really rough, and I didn't want to just paint directly onto the surface. So I realized I could use the rest of this caulking tube from another project as sort of a sculpting medium to create texture. For this project, I wanted to experiment with forced perspective, so I intentionally made the rock formations at the front of the set larger and gradually narrowed them towards the back. A material like plaster probably would have worked better since the caulk preferred to stick to itself, but another goal of this project was to make use of materials that I already have. I wanted to finish this tube before it dried up, and I also have a budding collection of cracker boxes, so I repurposed them for this project. Before the caulking dried, I went in with the sculpting tool to indent ridges. This will help in the painting stage to create the illusion of striated layers of rock. With the caulking stage complete, I decided to go even further and add layers of paper mache to soften the harsh, rigid texture and provide a better surface for the paint to adhere to. I made a glue mixture with 2 parts PVA glue and 1 part water, which I dipped the paper strips in and laid all throughout the canyon. I also used a paintbrush to get the paper fitted between the crevices. I made use of this green tissue paper because I have way too much of it, but I found that using it with glue and water seemed to activate the green dye, which stained my hands. Once the paper mache layers are dry, I began painting on the base coat. I started with this light yellow since I felt it would be a more forgiving color if I missed any spots. For the canyon's real base color, I wanted to go in with this red-orange paint and dry brush my way to opacity since I thought it would create a softer looking rock texture. But that was going nowhere, so I went all in with applying the paint. Once this layer had dried, I started to lightly paint stripes along the ridges of the canyon. I eventually developed a technique of watering down my brighter colors, like whites, tans, creams, and yellows, so that they'd appear more translucent. As I went along, I applied a wash of orange paint, which helped to create a tinted transparent layer that helped reduce the stark contrast between the stripes. Then I'd go back with regular paint application to add darker hues of oranges, yellows, and browns. Usually, washes are used with dark colors to apply shading to crevices, but in this case I used orange to create a cohesive and tinted layer. And with that, we finished painting the canyon. I'm really pleased with how it came out, and I think both the appearance and texture are convincing of real rock. Another key feature in Carusa Valley is the presence of frog statues that bear the Yiga Clan's crest. To make the statues themselves, I started with black polymer clay and crumpled aluminum foil as filler. Since I planned to make use of forced perspective in my set, I made 2 larger statues to sit at the front and 2 smaller ones for the back. I started out by rolling a simple ball, adding definition for the frog's back, and shaping a slight belly for the front. Then rolled 2 smaller balls and placed them on top as the frog's eyes, using silicone sculpting tools to indent the closed eyelids. I also played around with metal and silicone sculpting tools to blend the eyes in and add subtle details all around. For polymer clay, isopropyl alcohol can generally be used to smooth out fingerprints and remove dust, but to do so it melts the clay. I use this to my advantage to melt together this snake of clay for the mouth. To enhance the stone texture, I used metal sculpting tools to flatten and create angular indents in the clay. Because these frog statues are made of rock, I'm not too concerned about sculpting neatly. After completely curing in the oven, I placed them in the canyon to test the forced perspective effect, and I'm not too sure how I feel about it, but I guess it kinda works. Also draped throughout the canyon are rope decorations with hanging wooden cards, almost reminiscent of wind chimes. I rolled out a thick sheet of red polymer clay and cut them into various sized rectangles. Then, I used a needle sculpting tool to puncture holes into each of the cards, making sure they're wide enough to slide onto the rope. After baking, I noticed that I didn't mix the right red color of clay, so I had to repaint each card on either side. I've sculpted some Yiga Clan figurines myself, and I've learned that their uniforms use a specific red-orange color, which also seemed to be the case for these cards. From reference pictures, I've also noticed a trend of the rectangular cards having gray lower halves, while the square cards are painted on their upper half. So I replicated this pattern with dark gray acrylic paint on each of the cards. With all of the clay items cured, I went back to paint on details for the stone statues. I used makeup sponges to blend and blot on various shades of white, gray, and most importantly, earthy green tones, which gave the statues an aged stone appearance. The great thing about having used black polymer clay is that I already had most of the shading cut out for me, but I still went back in with a thin paintbrush to clean up the edges. The frog statues also have a red Sheikah eye symbol on their front, so I loosely added this on with red acrylic paint. To create the masks on the statues, I folded pieces of white tissue paper to reduce the transparency while still mimicking a delicate cloth. Then on top, I delicately painted the inverted Sheikah eye with red acrylic paint. I was going to sketch this out in pencil first, but I ended up going for it freehand. I wanted these masks to be removable, so I measured a loose-fitting piece of hemp cord and attached it to the mask. With the frog statues complete, I went right to assembling the hanging ropes, for which I used more hemp cord. I only had enough cards to complete 3 strands, but I positioned them at angles so that they'd appear fuller and look as though they were in motion from the wind. I also wanted these to be removable, so I could have a regular canyon set if needed, so I strategically placed them in spots where they could be held up with tape. Being a valley, the terrain isn't completely flat, so I crumpled pieces of aluminum foil to create raised levels in the sand. I also had a near disaster with the hot glue touching the canyon walls, but I was able to get it off before it damaged the paint. Aluminum conducts heat a little too well, so I started using tweezers instead to avoid burning my fingers. Lastly, I ripped apart a takeout cup carrier and used the pieces to mask the texture of the foil and add more dimension beneath the sand. To prep the base, I painted a layer of diluted PVA glue, which, looking back, was a mistake because I should have added a thicker layer of regular glue and something more heavy-duty like Mod Podge. After applying the glue, I used a spoon to help sprinkle in the sand. This part was really satisfying because I spent the entire build looking forward to this. This may look like water, but it's actually more rubbing alcohol, which supposedly breaks up the surface tension and helps the glue saturate and seal the sand grains. A lot of sources suggested using a spray bottle to apply it, but I didn't have one on hand, so I had to improvise and pour it all around. I did a lot of research beforehand with other tutorial videos and online forums on how to best approach adding sand, but I still kinda dove in without really preparing. I also made the mistake of trying to smooth things out with a paintbrush, but it just made a mess and disturbed the layers, which left the result muddy looking. So despite all of my work on camera, I had to spend a few days off camera reapplying the sand and flooding the set with more diluted glue and IPA to keep it all in place. I noticed that green coloring kept seeping through the sand, and it's still very much visible in the final result. Lastly, I also wanted to create the illusion of sandfalls in the background, and I thought these clear plastic strips were a good place to start, but this effect actually didn't work out in the end. I also read about using stretched cotton balls as another technique, but I didn't bother with that at this larger scale since it wouldn't have been as convincing. But in spite of all that, we've concluded the crafting process. Once again, huge thanks to LPS Cobalt for making me this spectacular custom, and I really enjoyed being able to design a set for it. I will link his socials in the description so you can check out more of his work. This was my first time creating a miniature diorama, and I'm so happy with how it came out. This is mostly a piece of fan art, but if you're also interested in more original set design videos, I would love to know. If you'd like to see more from this set, please check out my Instagram for the entire photo shoot. Or, if you'd like to read more in depth about the makings of this project, please be sure to check out my Instructables page. Thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!